This is your AP Government video on changing political beliefs. Sometimes our political beliefs change throughout our lifetime based upon the things or experiences that we go through. Now, most of the time, these changes are temporary, maybe for a few years or maybe 10 or 12 years, and then we go back to the core ideals we originally had. But there are some things that can change your beliefs for the long term. Major political events. Wars, 9/11 as an example, the terrorist attack, or the pandemic. The way that you perceive whether our reaction to those things or our government's reaction to those things were good or bad, the way you perceive how politicians were involved in solving those issues or not, can change your beliefs. There's also generational differences. So I put an example here. Older people are more likely to care about things like Medicare and Social Security. So if we amplify that particular discussion in an election, that can trigger more older folks to vote, depending upon whether they like or dislike those types of programs. Globalization. As we globalize and American ideals are more involved in foreign countries and them with us, that can affect our election. I put the example here that the American election of Donald Trump in 2016 greatly affected what was happening with Brexit in England. And those types of events, due to social media and news being so widespread, can affect various countries. There's also a lot of dynamic social change or protest movements, particularly with the advent of social media, that can affect people greatly. So these are just some from modern times, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, and Take a Knee, that began online and became really systemic social change that can cause more people to vote for the very first time, get engaged in politics, protest for the first time, and then certainly, vote for certain candidates over others. Now, every time we make change as a society, it triggers changes in politics. So the culture that we have created also kind of reflects the politics or the changes in policy that people want to see. So US is a very diverse country with lots of different types of demographics, not just racially, but all different types. And so as our country diversifies, or as we amplify the voices of certain diverse perspectives, that can change the way people vote, the way people protest, and the way that people elect certain candidates. We also have varying political participation. So the US does not have very high political participation. People tend not to vote in large numbers, comparatively to other countries with democracy. Our voter participation tends to be much lower than socialist democracies in Europe, as an example. We also are trying to balance your individual rights that are given to us in the Constitution versus government stability and national security issues. So even though we have the freedom of speech in the First Amendment, we can't say whatever we want because sometimes our speech can harm others or it can harm the government's right to keep us safe. And of course, there are changing ideologies within the party. Because the US only has two major political parties, people who, let's say, identify as a Democrat, there are lots of varying degrees of Democrat within that party because there's only two, Republican and Democrat. So there's lots of nuance in who I agrees with the Republican platform or who wants those things to change. And sometimes the two parties do change their points of view, and that could cause them to gain more members or lose more members. Okay, we're going to start your active learning page. This will be your first active learning page for Government Unit 4. This one is going to have you do some writing. First of all, you're going to define what you think the American dream is. In question 2, how do you think the American dream has changed over time? And then question 3, do you think it exists today for all Americans? I want you to explain and give an answer and use an example.